Peggy 3. Sega.
Virtua Tennis is, I'm getting excited even thinking about it, it's one of the greatest games. Look at me rubbing my hands with glee. It's one of the greatest games of all time. I had it on the Dreamcast. It looks beautiful, it's stunning. The physics in it are amazing. The sound is incredible.
Pong was obviously one of the first games ever. Whilst it's not overly obvious, you can see straight away that it has its roots in the tennis physics.
2 bats and a ball, and you're hitting it across the screen, trying to keep it on the screen. Exactly the same game. It's got fancier graphics, it's got fancier moves, it's got, famous tennis stars in it. It's exactly the same thing, though.
You could control Pong with kind of the twisty dial controller, move your little kind of bat up and down. And it was, it was a multiplayer game way, way, way ahead of its time.
If we look at Pong and we look at Virtua Tennis, has had an integral part in a gameplay experience that has inherently driven many different types of games that have transpired since.
And I think that's one of the great things about Virtua Tennis is that you don't necessarily have to be a huge tennis fan to love it. The mechanics of the game are so kind of pure and sort of simple and straightforward. The great joy you get from hitting a winning shot, the kind of excitement you get from just edging the ball back into play and keeping a rally going on that little bit longer. That they go back to, they go back years and years and years, certainly to when I was a kid and first playing video games. And the fact that, we're still delivering that now, it should be a source of pride for the development team. But it's, just as a gamer, it's great fun.
I think Virtua Tennis is kind of a classic Sega game. And what Sega are brilliant at doing is these games that are colourful, kind of got a realism, but it's like a hyper-realism. It's colourful, it's got great sounds, and you can just play them for 10, 15, 20 minutes. You can play them all night if you want. Sega to me is very pick-up and playable. I think that's across pretty much most of their games.
A great Sega game to me would be the visual quality, the ease of gameplay, and just how easy it is to pick up and play.
I think a Sega game at its best has to be, it's got to be fun, it's got to be quick, it's got to be colourful, bright, and it's got to be accessible. So a key Sega game like Virtua Tennis does all of that instantly. 10 minutes into it, you can be fantastic or you can be average.
The essence of a great Sega game is, I believe, gameplay.
It's vibrant, it's fun. Internally we call it the blue sky Sega. That Virtua Tennis has definitely got that. It's got all of that vibrancy, all of that fun, all of that playability.
I remember showing Virtua Tennis to kind of like my geeky gaming friends, and everyone was just blown away by it. It was such a stunning kind of breakthrough game that everyone was blown away by the playability, by the graphics, by the addictiveness.
当初やはりテニスの対戦ゲームを作ると言っても会社の中ではセガの中ではあまり理解を得られなくて、何をそんな化石、もう本当にゲームの化石みたいなジャンルを取り上げて、何を今更作ろうとしているんだとか、それこそどうせ作ったところでたくさんはヒットしないよっていうふうに言われて、とにかくセガの中で、プレゼンテーションして賛同を得るのが大変でした。そうですね、まずはテニスゲーム自体を作るぞってことが決まってからは、プロトタイプを作っていたプロトタイプのゲームを作るところからスタートしたんですが、当初はフ キャラクターも、オリジナルで作ってなくて、で他のゲームに出ていた鉄道員のキャラクターモデルを持ってきて、で鉄道員のキャラクターモデルがこう電車が入ってくる時にこう旗を振りますよね。そのアニメーションを使ってテニスゲームを作るようなテストをしました。でもちろんそこで承認を得られてからはアニメーションをきちんと収録し、キャラクターモデルを作成し、で AI を作るというような手順で、開発しました。
The AI is probably the most difficult competitor that I've played against in the game. I've played against a lot of players in real life, and they're very good, but they're not as good as the AI in the game. The AI is extremely difficult and can be very tricky to predict what the computer in the game, the AI in the game will do on every shot.
まずAI を作る担当者を探すときにどうしてもテニスの経験豊かなプログラマーが必要で、その人物に巡り会えたのが、成功のまず第一歩だったというふうに思います。でその後やはりそのテニスにすごい精通しているプログラマーだったということもあって、その各選手それぞれの特徴を捉えて、いかにそうですね AI で実現するかということを彼が徐々に解決していったっていうのが背景にあります。沼沢武史っていうんですけれども
The actual faces on the characters is very realistic, and the movement of the players is extremely fluid. The ball moving and everything while you're playing is very realistic as well. It doesn't move too quick, not too slow. The motions of the characters when they serve and hit the ball is very realistic of the actual players in real life.
そうですね、当時ドリームキャストと同じ性能を持ったそのアーケードのナオミシステムというものを使ったんですが、ナオミシステムが非常に3DCG の表現に強くなったボードだっていうことでセガの中でも新しいそうですねアーケード基盤として出たばっかりだったんですね。でその基盤の表現力がかなりそれまでのものに比べて向上したというのがあって、で私たちはじゃあここまでアーケードボードの性能が高まってきたんだったらリアルな本当にフォトライクな映像ができるんじゃないかと思って、で徹底的にまずテレビのですねテニスの中継をしているテレビ映像の検証を行って、それをいかにやはり再現するかってことを努力しました。そうですね、実は、その採用していたそのナオミシステムというアーケードの基盤がドリームキャストと同じシステム設計というかテクニカルの設計なので当初から、ドリームキャストにデビューできるチャンスがあればそのままポートして、ドリームキャストに持っていきたいって思いながらプロジェクトを立ち上げています。
I was extremely impressed with the console conversion. I will admit, I could not see any differences at all in gameplay, graphics, or anything that was different from the arcade. It was a perfect port.
Virtua Tennis in '99 in the arcades really did set a benchmark. It's really forged what is now known as a sports game. I don't think sports games would have the ability to replicate as closely now as they do if Virtua Tennis in the arcades and when it was ported across the Dreamcast wasn't there. I think it really laid a foundation.
One of the groundbreaking things about the game was that you could play as real tennis superstars. Now, I don't know that many tennis superstars, but I recognise Tim Henman. I know what he looks like and how he plays. And the Tim Henman in the game looked like Tim Henman. So they got, they got all of that, the stats, accurately. And it was incredible to have these characters that look like the people they were meant to be. Nowadays, that's dead common. You get it in FIFA, you get it in all of those things, they look like it. But back then, it was still a novelty to be able to pick which country, which player, real players, and be controlling them. Brilliant.
一番最初はどうやって取ったらいいか分からなくて、いろいろなライセンスの担当者に相談をして、でまず、どの選手がどういうエージェントと話をしているのかっていうのを確認したんですけど、でようやく大きなエージェントいくつかの会社と話し合いができる状態になって、私たちが次に行ったのはまずパ パワースマッシュバーチャテニスをどの国に出すのか、どの国のユーザーに当てて出すのかってことを考えて、その国籍だとか、あとそのプレイスタイルですとか、あとルックスだとかをバリエーション豊かに揃えることを、前提に考えました。もちろん一番特に大事だったのはランキングですけれども、世界のトッププレイヤーの中で、先ほど言った国籍や要望やプレイスタイルなどにバリエーションを加えて選別したというのがあります。まず VT1 では、選手の特徴をとにかく再現することに注意を払って、でその選手ならでは、その選手らしさということを実現するように工夫してきました。で2ではただそうなると確一的になってしまう、この選手ってこうだよねっていうふうに確一的になってしまうものを避けるために学習の要素を入れまして、ユーザーがどういうふうにゲームをしているかによってどんどん AI が変化していくっていう要素を入れたんですね。でそれでまたさらに3の時には、まさに1と2の合体版で選手の特徴を追求しながらもさらに学習するというところで結構やりきったところがあったんですね、3の中で。でじゃあ4はどういうふうにするのかっていった時に実はその2009で、NPC のキャラクターでそのオリジナル選手っていうのがどんどん新しく入ってたんですがAI のシステムは3を延長線上にあったので4ではそのオリジナル選手にももっと特徴を与えようということで、ライセンス選手ではできなかったことを幅広くできるようにしました。例えば怒ったりとか疲れたりとかわがままだったりとかっていうようなそういう要素を、ゲームの中で再現しています。
When you first saw those players come out and you looked at your Andy Roddick's and you looked at sort of the various people, Jim Courier's, who were in the game. Suddenly there was a connection with that person because it was the person you'd seen on television, and yeah, you could tell it was a video game, but there's nothing wrong with being able to tell it's a video game sort of thing. So I think that changed the way people wanted to view sports games.
I remember when Virtua Tennis came out that there was kind of, in the gaming community and in the magazines and stuff, there was a real buzz that something new had happened and was coming out, something very, very exciting. And it was certainly the game to have, the cool game to be seen with, definitely.
I think if you look at what Virtua Tennis sort of over a franchise has accomplished in terms of that representation, you now see that across the board and it's standardised within video games, and that was really introduced through Virtua Tennis. I don't think we would have sports games the way they are today if there weren't games like Virtua Tennis, which over a number of years have continued to push that and make those characters more and more lifelike.
I think Virtua Tennis, when it came out on Dreamcast, was the first true time that I felt that we had the arcade experience hit the front boom. It was that close a gameplay experience to standing in an arcade, I feel. It definitely set a benchmark for me in terms of how you experience an arcade game and that gameplay sat in front of a console in your home.
It was definitely one of the best examples of bringing the arcade experience into the home. It was always about Virtua Tennis too. That was kind of how I fell in love with arcades. That's kind of how I made an enemy out of someone I never ever met.
やっぱりVT1 がドリームキャストで出た後に大変多くの方々から本当に褒めてもらったというかユーザーにもたくさんこの、感動したっていうことを聞かせていただきましたし、またヨーロッパやアメリカの大きな新聞や雑誌などで、本当にサプライズとかアンビリバボーみたいな感じで褒めていただいたのがとても印象に残っています。
You felt quite good at it the first time you played it. There's no massive learning curve. It's not monstrously difficult. You didn't need to read the manual. You fired it up. It's tennis. I love tennis. So always understood the kind of mechanics of it. But within 3 or 4 shots, you understood exactly what you need to do to kind of move the computer around and perhaps beat him. That grabs you.
It was just really easy to play. I mean, it had 2 buttons. It had Your normal buttons hit the ball and it had a lob button. Yet within that, there was just so much you could do with it. You could play slices, you could play drop shots, it was all about how you position character and how long you held the button down. And it was just genius.
Just the excitement and gameplay that you got out of that experience, and that would have been just how easy it was to pick up and play the title, and that it was quite a leveler, that everybody was generally roughly the same standard.
The more you play, the more you learn. Actually, there's subtlety to it, there's complexity. You know, you've got to learn the different shots. It was that transition from thinking you were good to knowing you could get better. It was great fun.
It's just such a fun game to play. A lot of players will agree that this is probably one of the finest sports games that's ever been made. And in my opinion, why that is, I would probably say is the gameplay and how simple it is to pick up and play, and the realism of the gameplay and graphics.
I always thought that Virtua Tennis was quite easy to a certain level. It was quite easy to progress, and then suddenly you'd hit a point where it became incredibly hard to do. So it's fun, easy, 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 easy. Oh my God, that's really hard! And it just suddenly took on this whole new level. But it is one of those games that you can just pick up and play.
そうですね、ここにも書かれている通り、やはりアーケード向けっていうことで、なんていう挑戦的な難易度調整をしています。一つ一つのトーナメントを勝ち上がっていった時に、次も頑張る次も頑張るっていうふうに、ユーザーが思えるような難易度設定を、しているので、そういう意味では多少挑戦的というか、越えなければいけない壁のようなものを、加えています。
The learning curve, you're improving without knowing it. You always feel like you can hit a great shot. It only gets tough when you suddenly come up against someone, or at the computer, when the computer levels up and is suddenly way better than you. You realise perhaps you're not the Virtua Tennis guru that you have built yourself up to be.
Virtua Tennis is a joy. Now, why is it that I hate watching tennis, but I like playing Virtua Tennis? I don't know. There's something, I can't explain it. It's like voodoo. I think there's voodoo involved. Have they put voodoo in it, Sega? Probably. They're famous for that.
I was a big fan of tennis growing up. The greats, Sampras, Agassi, Becker, Courier, all those players. And I immediately saw that the roster of the players that were in the game were pretty much all players that I recognized. And what drew me to the game, I think, was the roster of players. And I immediately picked it up. I became familiar with all the players that they had listed for the game. And there was actually one player that I became really fond of because he has a very good backhand. And in the game, that's Yevgeny Kafelnikov.
I've always found that one of the best things you can do is actually start running through all the characters in the game, because you get so much, you always pick your favourite. I started out with Tim Henman in Virtua Tennis, moved on a bit to Leighton Hewitt, but always still played with Henman. But then I found Vida Sova in VT3 and found that there was a forehand there that no one was going to be living with, and you could play her against any character and use her forehand massively, or if you play with Sharapova, you were getting massive power out of that. It's fantastic.
The profile of certain tennis players would have been raised massively. Your frustration and how I inherently felt about an individual player was not born on watching them on telly, it was born on choosing them on Virtua Tennis.
Yevgeny Kafelnikov became my favorite player because to me he had all the qualities of the perfect player in the game. He was a good mover, he was a good ball striker, and he also had the very best backhand in the game. If you play with a lot of different players, you can easily tell the strengths that they have. And this character, as soon as you hit the backhand, it's like a super strong forehand that nobody can really return. It's very difficult to return.
But it was just Virtua Tennis 2 for whatever reason. I just kept going back to it, day in, day out. I remember using Pat Rafter actually, and I got to the point where I had the max serves down perfect, 9 times out of 10, max serve, run into the net, volley, easy point.
Before Virtua Tennis, the only tennis players I knew were Bjorn Borg, John McEnroe and Tim Henman, right? But suddenly, I'm playing virtual tennis and I'm aware of this strange name, Tommy Haas. Tommy Haas, Tommy Haas, Tommy Haas, 2 A's. Haas, Tommy Haas.
Tommy Haas. I just always played as Tommy Haas from the very first time I played it. I think he's the only character that's been in every single Virtua Tennis. So I've been able to go on a long Virtua Tennis journey with Tommy. He's long been a favourite.
And I never heard of this guy. So if I'm then watching like Wimbledon comes on or the Stella Artois, I believe that's a tennis tournament, I don't know, and you see Tommy Haas, you think, oh, yeah, I know him. I know that guy. It's Tommy Haas. I played him on Virtua Tennis.
In Virtua Tennis 1 and Virtua Tennis 2, he was a bit of a cult hero and a lot of people had him as their preferred player.
Haas seemed to have just a little bit more speed and a little bit more dexterity.
It's quite a long time that he's been in it now. He came through as a kind of up-and-coming young talent and is now in there as one of our more seasoned veterans. So I'm going to be petitioning the guys to keep him in there as a Virtua Tennis legend for as long as we can, I think.
Game, set, and match.
When Virtua Tennis 1 came out, the multiplayer mode of it, so playing against your mate, was just so much fun that, I wasted probably several months of my life playing it, I would say.
Every night after work, 4 of us huddling in a room and playing this new game that had come out on Dreamcast called Virtua Tennis. So, yeah, some fond memories and an awful lot of lost hours.
You know, I'd encourage everyone to play it multiplayer. If you've not done that, then you've really missed out. It's a great single player experience. You know, there's loads of depth and it's good fun. But if you've not crammed on a sofa with 3 of your mates, trying desperately to beat each other at doubles for several hours on end, then you've not experienced the best of it. That's the absolute high point of VT for me. It's the thing that I love doing the most. I couldn't begin to count how many hours of my life I've spent doing that.
I think the funniest moments from Virtua Tennis would have to be for me seemingly playing a shot a day before your player actually made the shot on screen. So you'd play one shot before the next player had played it, you'd already decided and played your reciprocal shot. So I think it was the absolute fun in the gameplay and how you could manipulate that to your own strength.
The propensity of players to dive when it's not necessarily a requirement.
I love the diving. I found that hilarious, that the ball would just be inches from you. You clearly would be able to make a shot, but no, there was the dive there, the glory boy. Dive across the court was always my favourite.
The diving, however close or far away you were from the ball, you would dive anyway.
You could lose a point like that and you'd be annoyed, but when you won 1 point like that, you'd be thinking, yes, that was special, I deserved that.
これはですね、ユーザーにいかに自分のその、プレーが、できてなかったかってことを知らせるために入れたアニメーションで、ただ知らせるだけだとじゃあエラーすればいいっていうかその空振りすればいいってことになるんですが、VT でやりたかったことっていうのはきちんとラリーが続くテニスゲームにしたかったんですね。でラリーが続くゲームにしたいイコールどんな球でも返せるようにはするっていうことが一つ約束事があって、で返せるけどヘナチョコなボールが返りますっていうそのユーザーの失敗を示すためにダイビングを入れました。
I think it was Virtua Tennis 3 that had the underarm serve. When Michael Chang did it to Van Lendl when he was cramping years and years ago, it was seen as a stroke of genius, but then kind of vilified a bit for not necessarily being sporting. It very rapidly became absolutely normal to try and do that in Virtua Tennis, mostly when your opponent wasn't expecting it.
What is weird though, those weird training sessions.
Oh no!
What are they all about? That's mental, isn't it? To have a training session where you're on a tennis court, but on the other side are like a dozen Skittles, and you've got to knock the Skittles down. The training games are brilliant because they're so mental. Isn't there one where it's like giant cubes, and you have to knock the cubes out of the tennis court? That's just mental. Why would anyone think, you know what, this tennis game, this brilliant tennis game, what's missing from it? Oh yeah, Skittles and giant cubes. You got it.
There's one thing now that I recall about Virtua Tennis that I would hope that other games can mimic in the future is the realism of the crowd. In not too many other sports games, the crowd is a factor in the match. But in Virtua Tennis, every time you hit a special shot, or an overhead smash or a perfect hit, you know, you'll hear the oohs and ahs of the crowd, and you'll hear them clapping and everything whatnot after certain games or points.
Love 30.
Music for Virtua Tennis, it's always been something which I never noticed, first of all. You just play the game and you don't notice there's music playing necessarily in the background. But once you actually hear it, you'll suddenly realise it is possibly the weirdest concept of delivery for what you're doing, but it's brilliant. I don't understand why it's brilliant. It's cheesy, it's a little camp. I don't know why, but it's great.
スポーツゲームの中で、BGM を入れるっていうことってほとんどやられてないと思うんですね。やはりリアリティを追求する上では BGM は邪魔になるって考えられていることが多いと思います。ただやはり先ほどからちょっとお伝えしている通り、テニスゲームってどうしても盛り上がり盛り下がりみたいなところが、ちょっと作りづらいとか演出しづらかったり地味になりがちっていうところもあったので、本来持っているテニスゲームの盛り上がり盛り下がりみたいなところを BGM の力を借りることで、よりよく表現したかったっていうのがあって、まずリアリスティックなゲームなんだけれども BGM を採用しているっていうのがあります。で、特にその曲調を選んだのは一番最初はロック的なものを選んだんですけれども、やはりとてもアグレッシブな気持ちになって、積極的にボールを追いかけたくなるような気持ちになるというようなところで、そういうロックの、曲調のものを選んでいます。
I realized I was getting good at the game when I was able to easily beat the AI opponents in the game on the harder difficulty settings. So that's pretty much what told me that I was really, really good at the game. Twin Galaxies is the Guinness Book of Records for video games. I looked on the site and I wanted to see if there was any scores for Virtua Tennis, either arcade or on the Dreamcast. And to my surprise, there were no records at all at the time. I took it upon myself to come up with how the record would be recorded. And I thought to myself, you know, I want to do it in a way so that there's going to be nobody able to contest my record for possibly years to come. And the only way I could think of doing that was not technically beating the opponents on the hardest settings every match and then reaching the final character. It wasn't just that. I didn't want it to just be about points. I wanted it to be about certain in a way that I know nobody else out there could match my skill level in the game. And the only way to do that was to beat the game without losing a single game in every match. There's two ways to do it. You can either do a full set, 6 games every match, up to 6, or the other way is to do it 3-love, to go up to 3 games or not. And I did 2 records in the game. I did beating it all the way to the final boss, 3-0, 3-0, 3-0, etc. And then I also did 6-0, 6-0, etc. to the end without losing a single game. All of them were 6-love, 6-love, or 3-love, 3-love. I accomplished the record both times with the same player, Yevgeny Kafelnikov. It didn't take many times to do it 3-love every match. Doing 3-love up until King at the end was not that difficult. Maybe, 2 or 3 times I was able to do it. And again, this is after years of practice with the game. I didn't just pick up the game that year that I submitted the scores. I've been playing the game for maybe already 4 or 5 years now. When I took it upon myself to try beating the game, without losing a game, 6-love, a whole set against every opponent, that's basically 7 rounds with King included. It took me very many times to do it. I can't say exactly how many, but I would probably guess maybe between 10 and 20 times. It was really the first time in anything that I had been regarded as a champion in anything or game or notified or being recognized on the internet. If you go to the website and you look up certain scores, you'll find me there with my name for 2 records for Virtua Tennis. So it was very satisfying to see my name up there with, you know, the names of other great players that are playing other games. If there was anyone to ever break the records in either one of the two that I have for Virtua Tennis, I would definitely want to go back and play the game so that I could beat their score and submit it so that I would be the new title holder of the game. Knowing that the original team is back on board for part 4, I think it could be great. You know, they know exactly what can make the next game work.
When I got to spend some time working with the team developing the game and working on the game in a production capacity, it really was quite amazing. To meet Kumagai-san, mainly for me, as a fan of the games, she's an absolute linchpin. She's a rock in the franchise, and as a fan of video games in general, she's one of the most prominent females in the industry.
What the team have done is they've looked at every single area of the game and they've held nothing back. They've designed the whole thing from scratch.
そうですね、4、3があって4があってってところ、その間に2009もありましたけれども、4を作ろうと思ったのはですね、もちろんまだやり残しているというか、まだまだやれてないことがたくさんあると思っていて、で、3、から2009である程度グラフィックの新しい形は提示できたけれども、ゲームの中身に関してはある意味あまり変化がなくて、で4をやるにあたってはその中身のところですよね、ゲームエンジン含めたコンテンツの内容で、新しいチャレンジをしたいと考えていました。グラフィックに関しては、3、2009から比べてもさらに新しいこと何ができないかなっていうことを考えて、一度全体としてはリセットしてるんですね。でよりリアリティや空気感を感じるようなポストエフェクトを実現するために全体のリソースを見直してで構築し直したっていうのがあります。でサウンドに関してもこれまでも先ほど言ったようにBGM を生かしたゲーム性っていうのを考えていたんですが、 BGM とサウンドのエフェクトがより一体感があるように演出するためにトライアンドエラーを続けていました。
When it comes to actually getting the game made, because we're based in Europe, which is the kind of the main sales territory for the game, we get asked a lot of questions by the team. They're incredibly inclusive in the way that they work, and they know that we're huge fans. The guys making the game love it. You know, you don't spend 10 years making a tennis game unless you have a passion for it. But there's a lot of people there that have. They genuinely enjoy it, and they understand what it is that makes Virtua Tennis, you know, a little bit different even from other tennis games. You know, that sort of quirky Sega-ness that that our team are able to bring and inject into the game. That just little bit of extra flavour, you know, the sort of simplicity married with the technology is what we do really, really well. So, you know, those guys are masters at it, and long may it continue.
はい、もうすごくたくさんいろいろとチャレンジしました。まずゲームエンジンに関してはマッチモメンタムという、自分のマインドを反映させるような要素を入れていますし、またネットワークに関しても、前作から対応はしてますが改めて、ワールドワイドで同じ環境で、遊べるような形のですね環境を整えましたし、またキャリアモードでもですね新しいワールドツアーではこれまでにはなかったようなある種自分のスター性を上げるといったような要素を入れたりだとか随所に新しいコンテンツを用意しています。
When it comes to choosing players for Virtua Tennis, we often get together as various departments and talk about them, trying to make sure that we're getting something for everyone. You know, we appreciate that this is more than just a game released in Great Britain and the States.
A guy from Chile started a Facebook campaign to have Fernando Gonzalez in Virtua Tennis 2009.
And I can't believe the pace that caught. It really caught on. It was massive.
And several thousand people joined the group. And it was brought to our attention. Before we started making VT4. You know, and I think that kind of love just deserves everything we could do to get them into the game. So yeah, we asked the developers if it would be possible, and they went away and came back and told us that yes, he was keen and that we'd be able to make it happen. So just a really nice little story of of how fans should definitely always tell us what they like and don't like.
特に本当に今回の4では 3D スクリーンやそのモーションコントローラーの対応っていうのも新しい要素なんですけれども、モーションコントローラーに関しては、当初から計画をしていました。ちょうどWii のモーションプラスもありましたし、PS3 で、Move また360で、キネクトという新しいデバイスが発表されるというところだったので、それはぜひともテニスゲームだったら絶対に対応しなきゃっていうふうに思っていました。一方で 3D スクリーンに関しては開発している途中で新しいテクノロジーとして紹介されたので、できるかなできないかなってという形でチャレンジしたのを覚えています。
Gaming is going to get more and more immersive, more and more hands-on, more and more realistic. And with these kinds of controls, it just brings different ways to play the game. And it just provides such an immersive experience that you can't get from a standard controller.
VT's always been simple to pick up and play. You've always just been able to grab the game, grab whatever controller it comes up with, and it's intuitive and it's straightforward. It couldn't be any more intuitive or straightforward with the Move. Anyone who's ever seen or played or even attempted to play tennis will understand the idea of holding a racket in your hand and swinging your arm. It fits so well, the Move controller fits so well with with the way that Virtua Tennis has grown and developed over the years.
そうですね。もちろんグラフィックが高精細になってユーザーの注目を、集めやすいっていうこともあると思いますが、特に 3D でテニスゲームをやるって言った時には高精細になればなるほどテニスのスポーツをする上で重要な奥行きですよね。がより感じやすくなることで、それによってスポーツアクションゲームの中で重要な奥行きをうまく使って、テニスゲームっていうかテニスのラリーを続けるっていうことに対してはとてもメリットがあると思います。はい。
I absolutely love the 3D. The first time you get the glasses on and have a look at it, you realise what a big difference it's going to make. It's to the presentation of the game. It kind of blows you away. Genuinely using 3D to improve the quality of the gameplay experience. It was really amazing to get a look at first time. It's a genuine technological advance. It's a real leap, and it makes the game much more fun. Tennis it's such a natural fit. You just look at it and realise the benefit. You see your opponent standing at the far end of the court, beyond the net, which is in nearer focus with the crowd behind him. All of a sudden, it's that much more kind of involving. You really feel like you're in the arena as opposed to kind of watching from a camera perspective. So that's a massive, massive step. It's incredibly exciting.
そうですね。やっぱりその時代にあったユーザーの中であるトレンドであったりとか、またもちろんテクノロジーも新しくなるし、プラットフォームもどんどん新しいものが出てくるっていう中ではなんていうのやっぱやり尽くすってことがないっていうかそうですね。オリジナルはオリジナル、2、3ってあるけれども、都度時代性やテクノロジーを、追求していくと新しくやりたいことや実現させたいことがどんどん増えていくというような感覚があります。
If there's one game I know that's the best out there and my favorite is Virtua Tennis.
With games like Virtua Tennis, you can go, I've got 20 minutes. Shall we quick Virtua Tennis, anyone? And you can have a game. You can have 2 games in 20 minutes. Perfect. Switch it off. That's it. Job done. That's one of the genius things about it.
The fun factor is just sky high.
The competitiveness that you can get out of Virtua Tennis that you can't get out of anything else.
Wow, that's spectacular. That's great.
It's a really immersive experience, and I've had a lot of fun playing it.
Virtua Tennis is fun.
Sega.